My name is Elias Monroe, and I'm 52 years old. And this is the story I never thought I'd speak out loud. For most of my life, I believed I came from a normal family. Not perfect, no, but normal enough. The kind of quiet Southern family people politely nod at on Sundays. The kind where neighbors say they keep to themselves. Good folks. I believed in us. I believed in loyalty. I believed in the kind of love you're supposed to receive just because you share a last name. And I believed silence meant peace. I used to think, well, every family's got their own way. But silence, mate. Silence can be a prison, and I lived inside it without even knowing the walls were there. The house I grew up in sits in the small town of Meadowpeen, just a short drive outside of Nashville. It's an old 2-story farmhouse with white wood panels that have yellowed under the summers, and a porch that creaks no matter how light you step. People driving by see it and say it looks peaceful, maybe even charming, like the kind of place that smells like fresh pie and feels like childhood memories wrapped in sunlight. But those people didn't live inside it. They didn't feel the heaviness that lived between the walls. They didn't hear the quiet. Our quiet wasn't peace, it was avoidance. Our quiet wasn't comfort, it was fear wearing a soft face. That house should have been filled with laughter, should have echoed with stories, clinking glasses, cousins running down the stairs, birthdays celebrated loud and unapologetically. But instead, it held whispers. Soft conversations stopped the moment footsteps entered the room. Eyes that looked past each other rather than into each other. Dinner tables where the clink of a fork against a plate sounded louder than words. Every memory I have from that house feels like watching life happen from behind a sheet of glass close enough to see, never allowed to touch. I used to think my father was distant because he was tired from working long hours. He wasn't cruel to me, not in the obvious way, he just wasn't there. His eyes were always somewhere behind me, lost in a place I didn't have the map to. My mother was quiet, soft-spoken, gentle hands, a careful smile like she was always afraid she might break something spoken or unspoken. And my brother, Aaron, people called him troubled, but I thought he was just misunderstood. He carried anger like some people carry their wallets, always on him, always ready, always heavy. I told myself we were just different people learning to live together. But the truth is, they weren't disconnected. They were protecting something, guarding it, hiding it. Not from the world, from me. They were all keeping something buried, something about me, something about who I really was. And I had lived more than half a century without ever seeing the cracks. That's the thing about lies built into childhood. They become the foundation. You don't know anything different, so you don't know anything is missing. And maybe I never would have known. Maybe they would have carried it to their graves and let me die with the wrong story in my chest. Maybe the truth would have turned to dust under that old house. Forgotten like so many things families try to bury deep enough that nobody feels them anymore. But secrets have a way of breathing, even when buried. And mine, it was breathing right under my feet. I didn't learn my truth because someone had a moment of guilt or confession. No tearful apologies at a deathbed. No dramatic slips in conversation. No. My family, God bless M, they were prepared to keep this locked down forever. The truth came out because of a wooden box, small enough to hold in one hand, old enough for the brass hinges to be green with age. A box hidden under floorboards in a room no one used anymore. A room that never had a purpose, never had furniture. never had memories, like it was forgotten on purpose. Like the house itself was trying to tuck something away where even time might not find it. And the moment, the exact second, my fingers opened that lid, my entire life collapsed in on itself. Everything I believed about my childhood, every story I trusted, every reason I thought something felt off, it all fell apart so quietly and so completely that I didn't even realize. I had stopped breathing until tears blurred my vision. Because in that moment, I learned something I wish I had learned sooner. Something I think about every single day now. Family doesn't always mean honesty. Blood doesn't always mean love. And silence is a choice, a decision, a cost, a wound, a wall, a curse if you let it be. I'm telling you this now because someone listening, someone out there, is carrying a silence of their own. And you need to hear me when I say this. Not every family secret is worth protecting. Some secrets aren't keeping the family safe. They're keeping someone trapped. I was the youngest of 2 sons, though sometimes it felt like I didn't really belong to the same story as the rest of them. My brother Aaron was 5 years older than me, and in every way that counts, he was larger. Not just in size, though he did tower over me by the time he was 13, but larger in presence, in volume, in the way he filled a room the moment he walked into it. People always say the oldest child carries expectations, but in our house, Aaron carried pressure instead, and that pressure sat on all of us like weight on the chest. My parents didn't talk to him so much as they talked around him, carefully, gently, measuring every word, as though speaking too loud or too sharp might light a fuse none of us could put out. As a kid, I didn't understand that. I just thought that was what families sounded like. Slow voices, careful steps, silences that lasted longer than conversations. I remember being little, maybe 5, maybe 6, and watching how my mother's shoulders would tense when Aaron came into the room. Just a small thing, barely noticeable, but once you see fear, even gentle, quiet fear, you don't unsee it. She'd smile at him, but it was the kind of smile someone gives when they're hoping a storm will pass them by. And my father, he didn't talk much at all. He sat at the dinner table like a man who had given up asking life to make sense. He chewed slow, swallowed slow, and stared at a point nobody else could see. If you asked me then what he was thinking, I would have told you he was tired. Now, looking back, I think tired was just another word for broken. One memory always grips me when I think about my childhood. The day Aaron pushed me down the stairs. I was 10. He had this old leather baseball glove, worn in just right, shaped like it held years of sun and sweat and summer grass. He loved that glove. I didn't even know I wasn't supposed to touch it. I only wanted to feel what he felt when he put it on. The moment he saw me wearing it, his face changed. Not anger first, but something wild beneath the skin, something sharp. Before I had time to explain, his hands were on my shoulders, and I was tumbling. I remember the sound more than the sensation, the thump of my back hitting wood, the crack of my elbow on the edge of a step, the ringing in my ears like a bell that wouldn't stop. The world blurred. My breath got caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. And then I remember the look on his face when I stopped moving. Not remorse, not shock, just emptiness. My mother rushed to me, but not the way mothers do in movies. There were no arms wrapping me up, no whisper of, "Are you okay, baby?" Instead, she grabbed my face, held it tight, and whispered fast, panicked, shaking, "Don't cry, Elias. don't make it worse. Please don't. Not make it worse." Those words carved themselves into me deeper than any bruise ever could. I learned something that day without anyone teaching it to me. My pain was a problem. My voice was a threat. My feelings were dangerous. And I swallowed that understanding so deep I didn't even realize it had become part of me. My father didn't come storming in demanding answers. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't punish Aaron. He just stood in the doorway, tired eyes, hands in his pockets, and watched. Like a man watching a fire he couldn't put out, so he didn't try. He just let it burn. That was my father, always watching, never intervening. People say silence is peaceful, but silence in our home was thick, suffocating. It filled the halls, pressed itself into the walls, lingered at the dinner table, crawled into bed with us at night. We didn't live like a family. We lived like roommates sharing the same ghost. Every day we moved around each other carefully, like furniture in a room too small. We played the roles we were each assigned without ever speaking the script out loud. My mother was the caretaker. My father was the distant provider. My brother was the storm, and I was the quiet one, the small one, the one who didn't make trouble, the one who learned to take up as little space as possible. I didn't question any of it, because when you're born inside a cage, the bars feel like the world. But there was one thing, one place that always felt wrong, even back then. The upstairs study. That room was different. No one went in. No one spoke about it. No furniture, no dusting, no light. The door was always locked, and my father always had the key hanging on a chain under his shirt. Sometimes I'd catch him touching it absent-mindedly, like a man remembering a wound. I'd walk past that door and feel something in me tighten, like there was something behind it, calling, pressing, waiting. I swear to you, even as a child, I could feel it, like truth scratching its nails against the inside of wood and time. But children learn to ignore the strange things, when the everyday already feels heavy. When a house teaches you to stay quiet, you learn not to look too closely at the things that don't make sense. Life sweeps you forward. School, chores, dinner, bed, repeat until the days blur together. And I kept moving, believing silence meant normal. Believing fear was just another kind of love. Believing that whatever was behind that locked door was none of my business. And for a long time, I didn't ask because sometimes, even when the truth whispers your name, you're too young to understand the language. Everything might have stayed buried. Everything might have rotted, quietly under the weight of years. If my father hadn't died, if time hadn't finally decided to take him the same way he lived his life, quietly, without warning, without confession, without a single word out of place. He was 79 when his heart stopped. They said it was peaceful. They used that word as if peace had ever been something our family understood. As if silence was the same as peace. It's not. Silence is the thing you choose when truths are too sharp to touch. Silence is the bandage. Silence is the coffin before the coffin. I went back to Meadowpeen for the funeral. The drive felt like returning to a ghost I had left behind. A version of myself I never quite understood. The town hadn't changed, the same stretched roads, the same old diner sign flickering, the same graveyard on the hill with its iron fence and peeling paint. Life there has a way of growing moss instead of moving forward. The family house stood the same way, too tall, tired, and still holding that feeling in the walls. That heavy quietness you could taste if you breathed too deeply. The curtains were still drawn in corners no one ever used. The floorboards still groaned like they remembered every argument, every secret, every moment of tension that never quite allowed itself to break. Inside, my mother moved like a surviving shadow, smaller, older, thinner than I remembered. Her hair, once dark, now hung in wisps of grey that looked like winter clinging to branches long after autumn had died. But her eyes were the real thing. Those eyes that had seen but refused to speak. They still held that same weight. The kind of weight that has lived inside a person for decades without once being given a voice. She hugged me, but it felt like habit, not love. Like something she was trained to do, not something she felt. And maybe I had grown used to that. The emptiness disguised as affection. My brother Aaron didn't come, didn't call, didn't send flowers, not even one damn word. And for once, no one questioned it. No one asked where he was. It was as if expecting him meant inviting fire into the room. So we all pretended the air was cleaner without him in it. 3 days passed in that house, 3 days of quiet rooms, polite condolences, casseroles left on counters we didn't touch, and a house full of people who didn't know how to look each other in the eye. And still, inside me, something old and familiar stirred, that itch behind the ribs, that whisper of a truth waiting to be heard. On the 3rd night, I woke up without knowing why. No sound woke me. The house was still, the kind of still that settles after grief finishes saying everything it can. I walked barefoot through the hallway, past the stairs, past the rooms I once slept in and never truly lived in, until I stood in front of that door. The study, the door. I had walked past 1,000 times as a child. The door no one opened. The door that belonged to silence. The lock was still there, black iron, old, unmoving. But the key wasn't hanging around my father's neck anymore, because he was wearing it. When we buried him, I can't explain what came over me except to say, the truth doesn't wait forever. It claws, it scratches. It pulls you by the bones when it's time to be seen. The next morning, I drove back to the cemetery. The sky was grey, a flat, tired grey, like the world itself didn't want to be involved. I stood in front of my father's grave, and I didn't say a prayer. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't apologize. I just started digging. Not madness, not cruelty, just necessity. The earth was cold and heavy, like lifting years of silence with my bare hands. I didn't open the coffin. I didn't need to. I just reached into the pocket of the burial suit, the one they dress you in when no one knows what you actually loved. And there it was, the key, cold, heavy, like the truth itself. When I returned home and slipped that metal into that lock, the click was so soft and yet so final, like a door opening somewhere inside my life, not just in front of me. The study smelled like paper and dust and memory, a room frozen in time, a desk that had been untouched, shelves full of books that weren't read for reference, but for hiding things behind them, a rug that hid the scarring in the floorboards. I don't know how I knew where to look. Instinct, maybe. The kind of instinct a child develops when raised around secrets. I pulled the rug aside. The floor gave beneath my fingers with a soft groan, and there, tucked between wood and dust, was the box, small, hand-carved, locked once, but now waiting. When I opened it, the air didn't change, I did. There, inside, lay a photograph of a baby wrapped in a white cloth, a baby I had never seen before, a baby who didn't look like me, not really. The eyes were the giveaway, not the shape, but the story behind them. Those eyes didn't belong to the Monroe family. Underneath the photograph was a birth certificate, and the name printed there wasn't mine. No hospital I recognized, no signature I could place. No mother's name I had ever heard spoken in my life. The truth did not scream. It didn't shout. It didn't break the world in some dramatic sound. It whispered, "You were never theirs, not by blood, not by blood, not by birth, not by the story you were told to live. Had been someone else's child before I was theirs. I had been hidden. I had been chosen to keep a secret alive, and now the secret was awake." I stayed there, frozen, sitting on the dusty wooden floor of that old study while the fading afternoon light spilled through the curtains like it was trying to reveal something the house had spent decades hiding. The birth certificate trembled just slightly between my fingers, though I kept telling myself I wasn't shaking, that I was calm, that I was still myself, but I wasn't. Not anymore. Name, Elias Hartwell. Mother, Grace Hartwell. Father, unknown. It looked unreal, like a prop from some story that didn't belong to me, like someone else's life had slipped into my hands by mistake. My eyes traced the letters over and over, as if repetition would make it vanish, reverse everything, return me to the version of myself I had always known. But the ink stayed, the words stayed, and the truth stayed. Hartwell, not Monroe, the name I had written on school papers, on job applications, on forms, on Christmas cards, the name I carried like a banner of identity, of belonging, of family, wasn't mine. It had never been. My entire life had been spoken under a name that wasn't connected to me by blood, by birth, by anything except the decision of someone else. And somehow, the silence in that room grew louder, not with sound, but with meaning, like the house itself was watching me, like every closed door, every cold dinner, every unfinished conversation had been leading to this moment. My eyes wandered back to the photograph inside the box. A baby wrapped in a thin white blanket, cheeks full, expressions soft, eyes open just slightly, as if even then, even as a newborn, he knew this world had plans for him he would not understand. I hadn't noticed it at first, but now I couldn't miss it. The scar, the tiny crescent-shaped mark, just above the right eyebrow. The one I see every morning when I shave. The one I was told came from falling off a bicycle when I was 4. But as I stared at that baby, something inside me shifted, not like remembering, but like uncovering, like a wind blowing dust off a stone to reveal a carving that was always there. I did not remember that fall, not the bike, not the road, not the pain, not the bandages, nothing. It was a story someone had given me, and I had believed it because I didn't know any better. My chest tightened, something hot rising behind my ribs, something thick and unfamiliar, not fear, not sadness, something deeper, something heavier, a kind of grief, but not for someone who was gone, grief for myself, for the life I thought I understood. I whispered the words without meaning to. They just came. Who was I? The room didn't offer answers. No thunder, no revelation, just the familiar stillness, the kind of silence that wasn't empty, the kind that knew, but the box wasn't finished with me. Beneath the photograph, beneath the certificate, was a stack of letters tied together with a ribbon. Dark red, old enough that the color had faded into something like dried blood or wilted roses. The paper of the envelopes was yellowed, thin at the edges, delicate in a way that suggested time had worn them down slowly, deliberately, like the past trying to erase itself. I didn't want to untie the ribbon, but I did. The letters inside were all addressed to my father, or rather, the man I had called my father my entire life, his name written in a handwriting that was soft, looping, gentle, like the writer believed he would cherish the words, like the letters were being placed into loving hands, except that wasn't the truth. I opened one, then another, then another. The first few were hopeful, patient. I hope you are well. I assume Elias is walking by now. I trust he is healthy. Please tell him that his mother loves him. Then the tone changed. You said I could see him. Please don't take that from me. You promised I could visit. Why are you ignoring my letters? He is my son. Then the words began to shake, ink pressed harder, strokes sharper, desperation bleeding through the page. Please, please, I only want to hold him. He deserves to know where he came from. He deserves the truth. And then the one that broke me, if you love him, don't erase me. My mother, my real mother, begged. She begged for me, begged for a chance to see her child, begged the man who raised me to allow her even a glimpse, and he refused her, not once, not accidentally, not in confusion. He refused her for years. I felt something inside me collapse, something that had held up my entire understanding of my life. It didn't break with noise or spectacle. It didn't explode. It just folded, quietly, like a house sinking into the soil because the foundation was never meant to hold it. They didn't adopt me. They didn't save me. They took me, and then buried the evidence under silence, under routine, under dinners where no one spoke and rooms no one entered, and a father who never looked me in the eyes long enough for me to see the truth reflected there. I tried to remember my childhood, not the stories I'd been told, but the actual memories, and suddenly everything felt thin, blurred, like the edges of my life had been smudged by someone else's hands. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, the world slower, and I realized, with a clarity that felt like a blade, my life did not begin where I thought it did. My story had been rewritten before I ever learned to speak, and somewhere out there, maybe alive, maybe gone, was a woman who once held me in her arms and refused to let me be erased. A woman named Grace Hartwell, my mother, my real mother, and without knowing how, without knowing when or what I would find, or what it would break next, I knew I had to find her. The house felt different after the letters, not haunted in a ghost story way, no, but in the way a room feels after someone has spoken a truth that can't be buried again. The air was heavy, still, like even the walls were holding their breath. My footsteps down the staircase didn't echo. They dragged, like I was carrying something behind me. Maybe I was. Maybe it was the weight of a name, a history, a truth that had been locked away longer than my life had made sense. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table, the same table I had eaten breakfast at as a boy, swinging my legs too short to touch the floor, the same place where I learned how to write my first cursive letters, the same place where birthdays were sung softly, not joyfully, as if joy was always rationed in this house. She held a cup of tea in her hands, but the tea had gone cold long ago. I knew because the steam wasn't rising, and my mother, she never drank tea cold. She was just holding it the way someone might hold a memory they weren't ready to let go of. Her eyes weren't on me. They weren't anywhere in the room. They were someplace far and distant, like she had already seen this moment coming, like she'd been preparing for it for years and still wasn't ready. I stopped across from her, not sitting, not moving closer, just standing, because the ground between us didn't feel like floor anymore. It felt like thin ice. Who is she? My voice didn't break. It didn't shake. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, the kind of quiet that only comes when your world has already fallen apart and nothing is left to hold up. She didn't look surprised. She didn't gasp. She didn't pretend not to understand. She just closed her eyes, slowly, carefully, like the truth itself weighed too much to face openly. When she opened them again, her gaze didn't meet mine. She was my sister, and that one sentence, just 7 words, rearranged everything in my chest. Grace Hartwell wasn't just a stranger. She wasn't some forgotten woman who drifted into my life on paper and sorrow. She was my mother's younger sister, my aunt, my mother by blood, by mother by birth, the woman who had carried me inside her body, the woman who had named me and my mother, the one who raised me, fed me, bandaged my knees, tucked me in, had taken me from her, not borrowed, not adopted, taken. Taken. She didn't look at me when she began speaking. The words didn't rush out, they leaked, like something inside her had been cracking for decades and was finally letting itself crumble. Grace was always different, she said quietly. She was bright, she was wild, she loved too deeply and too easily. She fell for a man who didn't stay. The family didn't like it. They said she was foolish, irresponsible. There was no judgment in her tone, just remembrance and regret. She had you, my mother said, her voice softening, like even saying that memory hurt her. And she loved you more than anything. But she was alone, tired, struggling. She was barely more than a girl herself. And her voice broke. The first crack. I couldn't have children. She looked up at me then, and her eyes, God. Her eyes were oceans. Old storms. She didn't cry, but the tears lived behind her pupils like they had lived there for decades, waiting for this exact moment. I wanted you so much. Her hands trembled around the cup. When she asked for help, when she was sick, when she thought she was getting 1 week to rest, I told her I would look after you. 1 week became a lifetime. She begged for you, I whispered. My throat felt tight, raw, like the words were scraping their way out. My mother's face collapsed, not physically, but emotionally, like she finally realized that I had seen the letters. All of them. She came to the house. She stood on the front porch, crying, begging. I told her you were sleeping. I told her you were sick. I told her anything that would make her go. There are some kinds of silence that tear through bone. This one was like that. My hands had curled into fists without me noticing. My jaw was tight enough to ache. And yet my voice, when it came, was barely more than a whisper. I was her son. She rose quick, desperate, reaching for me like a drowning woman trying to catch a rope. You were my son. She breathed, hands trembling, voice cracking. I loved you. I raised you. I stayed through every fever, every nightmare, every heartbreak. I held you. I prayed for you. I chose you. I couldn't give you back. I couldn't lose you. I couldn't. Her voice dissolved into something that wasn't quite crying, but wasn't speaking either. And the worst part, the part that splintered something deep in me, something I didn't want to admit. She was right. She had loved me, not lied about loving me, not faked it, not pretended her love had been real, real and cruel, real and selfish, real and damaging, real and desperate. Love that takes love, that holds too tight, love born from emptiness and fear of being forgotten. My chest felt like it was being pulled apart. Two truths tearing in opposite directions. I was her son. I had been her world, but I was stolen. I was someone else's son first, and both things were true at the same time. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't storm out. That would have been easier, simpler, cleaner. But this wasn't a moment that allowed clean emotions. This was the kind of grief that wrapped itself around two people and held them both underwater. So I just stood there, breathing in a house that suddenly didn't feel like home, looking at the woman who raised me and realizing I didn't fully know her, and realizing she had lived her entire life terrified this moment would come. She looked at me like she already knew she had lost me, and I looked at her the way someone looks at a painting they've stared at their whole life, only to realize they've been seeing it wrong the entire time. No shouting, no blame, no answer, just two lives built together, cracking in the quiet. The drive to see Erin took 8 hours, though it felt like I was crossing more than distance. It felt like I was driving through time, through every unanswered question, every strange moment from childhood that I had shrugged off, every memory that didn't sit quite right but I swallowed anyway because that's what kids do. We don't question the world we are given. We just learn how to live inside it. But now the world I had been given had cracked open, and I was driving straight into the part of it that had always scared me most. Erin lived in a small town off an old highway, the kind of place where the only gas station doubles as the grocery store, the gossip hub, and the post office. His house sat at the end of a gravel road lined with trees that looked tired, branches drooping like they had seen too many winters. The house itself was the same one he'd had since his 20s, paint peeling, porch steps sagging, windows clouded, a yard filled with rusted engines, car doors, tires stacked in uneven towers, like time had been piling up on him the way the metal piled up outside his home. I remember standing there on his porch, my hand hovering just before knocking, and thinking that this door had once been a battlefield, that whatever waited behind it had teeth. But when I knocked, there was no growl, no tension, just footsteps, slow, steady, familiar. When the door opened, Erin looked at me the same way he always had, like he was studying me, measuring the years between us, calculating whether he needed to brace himself or breathe. He looked older, not in the way wrinkles show time, but in the way the eyes carry it. His hair was grayer now, beard rough, shoulders heavier. Life had been chewing at him, and he hadn't bothered to fight it off. He didn't smile. He didn't ask why I was there. He just let out a slow sigh, the kind that comes from the bottom of the lungs, where the things we don't say live, and he stepped aside so I could come in. "You finally found the box," he said, just like that, no guessing, no denial, no surprise. Not what box. Not what are you talking about. Just the acknowledgement of something that had always existed between us, silent, heavy, waiting. I stood there, still holding my coat, still standing just inside the doorway, because the room didn't feel familiar anymore. It felt like a story I had once been part of without knowing it. "You knew?" I asked. The words came out softer than I expected. Not angry, not accusing, just tired. Aaron nodded, not with guilt, not with shame, with something that looked like resignation, like someone who had been waiting years for someone else to finally catch up. "Since I was 6, he said it the way someone describes what they ate this morning, casually, plain, unaffected. But the words didn't land casually. They landed like stones dropped into deep water, sinking fast, out of sight. Heavy. 6. He had been 6 years old, a child who had been carrying the truth of my life longer than I had been alive in memory. He walked past me and sat down at the kitchen table, lighting a cigarette even though there was already a full ashtray. I remembered our mother hushing me. I remembered her stepping carefully around him. I remembered our father avoiding the fights. And now, all of it clicked into place with a clarity that felt like someone had turned the lights on in a room that had been dark for 50 years. "It was the first big argument I remember," he said, voice flat, smoke curling in front of his face. She was screaming. Dad was crying. Grace was outside banging on the door. I didn't know what was going on. I just knew you weren't supposed to hear it. And after that, you were just my brother, whether you were or not. My throat tightened. He didn't look at me when he spoke, just stared at the wall like the past was replaying there in old film grain. "She came back for you," he said. "A lot, they told me. They told me she was unstable. They told me she'd ruin our lives. They said she didn't deserve you." His jaw clenched. Not with anger, with grief, and I believed them. Because I was a kid. Because they were the adults. Because what else was I supposed to believe? He finally looked at me then. His eyes, the same shade of brown mine never were, held something familiar for the first time. Regret not for what he had done, but for what he couldn't undo. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked the question didn't come out like a challenge. It came out like a wound, like something that had been waiting to be spoken since I learned how to talk. He took a long drag, let the smoke out slow. "You were the only good thing in that house." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't break. He just said it like it was the simplest truth in the world. "You were the thing everyone was fighting over because they wanted something to claim, something to fill a hole, something to hold on to. And if I told you the truth when we were kids, we both would have broken." He looked older then, not in his body, in his soul. He tapped the ash into the tray with a quiet flick. "I wasn't angry at you," he said. "I was angry for you." And I saw him, really saw him, for the first time. The brother I had feared, the brother I thought hated me, the brother who shoved, who yelled, who slammed doors hard enough to shake the walls. He hadn't been the monster of our childhood. He had been the only one trying to survive it. He had been protecting me, not from others, but from the truth. And I had gone my whole life thinking he was the danger, when he had been the shield. Life is cruel like that. Sometimes, cruel in the way it shapes. Love into anger. Cruel in the way it hides protection inside. Silence, cruel in the way too. Brothers can grow up under the same roof and still feel like strangers, while loving each other more than either one knew. How to say, we sat there for a long time, no yelling, no blame, no apology, just two men finally standing in the same story. Sleep became a stranger. I would lie in bed with my eyes open to the darkness, the ceiling above me shifting like waves in the ocean, my thoughts refusing to still. Every breath felt like it belonged to someone else, someone whose life I had stolen without even knowing. Every beat of my heart felt borrowed. I had lived 28 years in a name, a story, a love that had not been mine to begin with. And now that I finally knew the truth, it was as if every memory I ever trusted had split itself down the middle. One side, familiar. The other side, hollow, Grace. Her name felt both sacred and distant on my tongue, like a prayer whispered after years of silence. Grace Hartwell, my mother, the woman who never stopped asking for me, who never stopped writing, who never stopped loving a child she could not hold, the woman whose voice I had never heard, whose arms I had never known, and yet, somehow, she felt like she had been carved into me from the beginning. I had to find her, no matter what it took. The search was not dramatic, not fast, not clean. It was slow, like wading through thick water. Every step felt heavy, every phone call, every record request, every dusty file in the back rooms of county buildings that smelled like old paper and older regrets. I found traces of her, not in stories, but in the spaces where stories should have been. She had vanished from town records like someone who had been erased on purpose. People I questioned spoke in half sentences and loaded silences, their eyes flicking away as if afraid the truth might stain them by association. She was troubled. She was heartbroken. She didn't stay long. 3 sentences, 3 wounds, but I did not stop. I searched through church registries, handwritten logs, with ink faded to the color of memories. I searched through hospital archives, public directories, the yellowed pages of yearbooks, and forgotten phone listings. Days blurred, nights folded into morning without rest. I lived on coffee, exhaustion, and a heartbeat I swear was not entirely my own. It felt like hers, calling to me across the years. Then, one night, somewhere between old newspapers and the sound of rain hitting the window like impatient fingers, I found it. One small note, a relocation record from decades ago, a social worker signature, a forwarding address, not even a full one, just a city and a name of a care facility, a place for the forgotten. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, the world was silent, as if everything had held still to see what I would do next. I was already grabbing my keys before I realized I was moving. The drive took 9 hours, though it felt like both 5 minutes and 50 years. I barely remember the road. I only remember my hands on the steering wheel, gripping it hard enough to make my knuckles white. The horizon blurred. My heart was beating so loudly I could feel it in my teeth. It was not fear. It was something more vulnerable, something unsteady. The same trembling hope a child has when they run into the dark calling for someone they are no longer sure exists. The facility was small, quiet, surrounded by trees whose branches swayed in the warm Louisiana wind. The building was simple, soft yellow paint faded under sun, windows open to let in the smell of grass and river water. It did not look like a place where people were forgotten. It looked like a place where the world came to rest. When the nurse asked who I was, I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Not at first. My throat tightened, my voice caught behind years of wanting I didn't understand until that moment. I paused, as if I had to choose who I was. I'm her son. The nurse's expression changed, not shocked, not confused, but gently, heartbreakingly relieved. We wondered if you'd ever come, she murmured, as if they had been waiting, too. She led me through a hallway softened with calm colors and quiet footsteps. And there, near a window that overlooked a garden of wildflowers, tall, unbothered, untamed, sat a woman. Her hair was silver, falling in soft waves. Her hands rested in her lap. The sunlight framed her like something the world should have protected. I knew her before she turned, not from memory, but from something deeper, blood, bone, the invisible thread that never truly breaks. I stepped closer. The floor felt unsteady under me, like the world was shifting to make space for what was coming. Grace, I said, her head lifted slowly, almost cautiously. Her eyes, my eyes, looked up at me, and in that single second, everything I had ever been, everything I had ever questioned, everything I had ever lost, returned. She knew me, not as a stranger, not as a face, but as her son. Her hand rose to her chest, pressing lightly over her heart, as if steadying something inside her that had just awakened. My boy, she breathed, her voice cracked on the word boy, like she had spoken it to the empty air for 50 years, and the air had finally answered. I didn't walk to her, I fell into her arms, into her scent, into the shape of a home I had never lived in, but had always missed. I cried the way a child cries, unguarded, unbroken, raw. She cried the way a mother cries, softly, fiercely, with love that had waited a lifetime. There were no apologies, no explanations, no anger, just reunion, just recognition, just love. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel like I belonged to a lie. I felt like I belonged to her. We spent days in that quiet place, just the two of us, and time that felt like it was trying to catch up after decades of being denied. I'd sit beside her near the sunlit window, where the warm light pooled across her hands and made her skin glow like parchment that had held too many stories for too long. I watched the way she breathed when she spoke, careful and slow, as if every word risked reopening something inside her that had never fully healed. We talked, and I don't mean the easy kind of talking, the type you do in passing or small talk to fill air. No, we talked in the way people do when they are trying to build a bridge, back to each other across a canyon of years, regrets and ghosts. She told me everything, the kind of everything that takes effort, the kind of everything that makes a person pause, swallow, breathe, and then continue, because stopping would hurt even more. She said she had never, not once, stopped thinking of me. Not during the years she wrote letters that were never answered. Not during the nights she sat awake begging God to let her hear my voice. Not during birthdays she spent alone, whispering wishes for a child who wasn't there to see the candles. Not even when the world told her to let go. She didn't. She held my name inside her like something sacred, a small flame cupped between hands that life had weathered but never fully extinguished, and I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't try to rush her. I let her speak the way you let someone breathe after drowning. She told me about the day she lost me, not in anger, not in accusation, but in sorrow that had settled deep into her bones. The kind of sorrow that doesn't fade, only changes shape. She said she was young, exhausted, overwhelmed, judged by everyone who never once tried to understand the weight she carried. She said people saw her as reckless because she loved too freely, and because she refused to hide the signs of being human. The town cared more about reputation than compassion, and in the eyes of that world, my mother, the one who raised me, looked like the better choice, married, stable, respected, safe, safe. The word safe tasted bitter in my mouth when she said it, because now I knew what safety had cost. She didn't lose me because she was unfit. She didn't lose me because she didn't care. She lost me because she didn't fit the story people wanted to believe, the story that made them comfortable, that made them feel they had done the right thing. The truth was simple and devastating. She was never given a chance, and as she spoke, I felt the years I lived under a different name, in a different house, in a different life, pressing down on me, not as weight, but as realization. I began telling her about my childhood, piece by piece. The birthdays, the dinners, the arguments, the quiet nights. I told her about Aaron, my brother, and how he had carried the secret like a stone he couldn't put down. I told her about the love my parents gave me, and the lie that held it all together. I braced myself for hatred. I expected anger, resentment, bitterness sharpened into a blade. But Grace didn't hate them, and that stunned me. She just let out a slow breath, looking out the window to where the breeze moved the flowers in gentle waves. She spoke like someone who had spent her life learning to forgive the world, not because it deserved it, but because she needed peace to survive it. People do terrible things when they're afraid of emptiness, she said. Her voice didn't shake. Mine did, because I finally understood. My mother, the woman who raised me, had lived her entire life with a wound the world could not see. A wound shaped like silence, shaped like absence, shaped like all the futures she would never have. She wanted to be a mother so desperately that she built her love out of something stolen, because the void inside her was louder than the truth. She didn't steal me because she was cruel. She stole me because she was breaking, because she believed if she let me go, she would shatter into pieces too small to gather again. And Grace, the woman who brought me into this world, knew it. Not then, not fully. But now, sitting with me in that sun-drenched room, she understood, and she forgave her, not because what happened was right, not because love justified the damage, but because she knew what loss does to a person. She had lived with loss as her shadow for half a century. I felt something in me loosen, not fully heal, but soften. Love is complicated. Love is selfish. Love is desperate. And sometimes love can be built from grief. And sometimes grief can be shaped like love. We sat together in silence for a long time after that. Not the kind of silence that hurts, but the kind that comes when two souls finally recognize one another without needing words. I laid my hand over hers. She laid hers over mine, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel divided between two worlds. I felt like I was allowed to belong to both. My mother, the woman who raised me, the woman who held me while I slept as a child, the woman who sang softly in the kitchen when she thought no one could hear, passed away 6 months after I found the truth. Grief is strange. It does not arrive the way you expect it to. It does not knock or announce itself, or give you time to prepare. It seeps in like fog, slow and quiet, until you realize you are surrounded by something you cannot escape. I had just begun to understand her, just begun to see the fractures beneath her quiet smile, just begun to unravel the woman she was: complex, flawed, fragile, And then time simply ran out. Hospice smelled of antiseptic and lavender, an odd combination, as if the world couldn't decide whether to sterilize pain or soften it. I sat at her bedside every day. The machines hummed. The nurses came and went. And my mother, the only mother I had ever known in the daily rhythm of childhood, lay small and pale, her hands thin, her voice reduced to something that came in whispers. There were times she slept with her mouth slightly open, and I would just watch her breathe, slow, uneven breaths, like her body was trying to remember how to stay. I kept thinking about how many years I had resented her without knowing, how many dinners I sat across from her, believing she was distant, when really she was afraid. Afraid I would see the truth in her eyes. Afraid I would ask a question she could not answer. I thought I would be angry. I thought I would confront her. I thought I would demand explanations, apologies, confessions. But when you see someone slipping away, all the grand speeches you imagined crumble into dust. Love has a way of silencing vengeance. The night before she passed, the sky outside her window was a deep blue, that soft, velvet kind of blue right before dawn considers rising. I sat beside her and told her stories from my childhood, real memories, the warm ones, the ones that still held color. I reminded her of the time she taught me how to make peach cobbler, the time she helped me fix the bicycle I fell from, though now I knew that memory wasn't real. But the care was, the love was, the tenderness was. Love was real, even if the story around it wasn't. Her fingers were frail, but she squeezed my hand. And in that squeeze, I understood something that took me 50 years to learn. People can do unforgivable things out of love, and still, the love can be real. When her breath grew shallow, I leaned close. I didn't want her to leave afraid. I didn't want her to leave thinking I hated her. I didn't want silence to be her ending. She blinked, slow, tired, heavy, and the smallest smile tugged at her lips. And with a voice that sounded like it was made of smoke and memory, she whispered, "I'm sorry. I loved you too much to let you go." Her eyes were wet, so were mine, and in that moment, with grief kneeling in the room beside us, like an old companion, I forgave her, not because she deserved forgiveness, not because the past became soft, not because pain disappeared, but because I needed peace more than I needed blame. Blame is a chain. Peace is release. She exhaled a soft, final sigh, like she had finally put down something she had been carrying all her life. And then she was gone. I held her hand for a while longer, even after the room fell. Still, even after the nurses came in, even after the world kept moving, because goodbyes don't happen all at once. Goodbyes happen slowly, in the heart, in the quiet. Aaron came to the funeral. He stood beside me, not close, not emotional, but present. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. Our childhood had been built in silence. Our adulthood would not heal in words. But we speak now. Not every day, not deeply, but enough. Enough to know we are no longer alone in the story. And Grace, my real mother, became a part of my life. Not to erase what was, not to rewrite the past, but to fill the spaces that had always ached without a name. She held my childhood photograph like it was gold. She laughed the first time I called her mum accidentally, not because I was replacing anyone, but because some words are allowed to belong to more than one person. I didn't lose one. Family. I gained two truths, one built from love, tangled in lies, one built from love, starved by distance, both imperfect, both real, both mine, and somehow, that was enough to finally feel whole. If there is anything you carry with you after hearing this, anything at all, let it be this. Silence does not heal. Silence does not protect. Silence does not preserve. Love silence only delays the breaking. For most of my life, I thought quiet meant peace. I thought avoiding the hard conversations meant keeping the family together. I thought not asking questions was the same as being loyal. But silence is not loyalty, it is surrender. And I surrendered my entire childhood to a story that was never mine. I look back now and realize that the cracks were always there. The way my mother held me too tightly, as if I might slip away. The way my father avoided my eyes when I asked about old family photos. The way my brother's anger always felt like a shield rather than a weapon. The way the house itself carried tension, as if its walls were guarding something heavy and fragile. We were a family built like glass, beautiful in the right light, but one truth away from shattering. And when the truth finally came, it did break us, but it also freed me, because truth, even when painful, is solid. Truth can be rebuilt. Truth can be forgiven. Truth can be held in your hands and understood. Lies dissolve the moment you touch them. I learned that love is not proven by what we hide, but by what we are willing to face together. I am Elias Monroe, or Elias Hartwell, son of two women who loved me in different ways, one fiercely, desperately, fearfully, the other quietly, patiently, painfully. One taught me how to live, the other taught me who I am, and I once thought I had to choose between them, choose which version of myself was real. But identity is not a single thread. It's many threads, knotted together, pulling tight, refusing to come undone. I am the child of grief and of love, of mistakes and of longing, of theft and of devotion. I am a story stitched out of fractured beginnings and reclaimed endings. And I learned something I want you to hear, really hear. Love is real, but love without truth is a cage. And sooner or later, every cage breaks. So if there is a question haunting you, ask it. If there is something unsaid sitting heavy in your chest, speak it. If there is a secret in your family, shine light on it, because silence may feel safe now, but it charges interest, and eventually the cost will come due. I spent 50 years not knowing who I truly was. 50 years believing a story that was convenient, not honest. 50 years living behind a curtain someone else closed. And yet I stand here now, not broken, but whole, because the truth did not ruin me. It rebuilt me. Maybe not exactly the way I expected. Maybe not without pain, but real, solid, mine. So, if you are listening to this and something inside you is whispering, something isn't right, something is missing, something doesn't add up, don't ignore it. Your life is your story, not anyone else's to edit, rewrite, or hide. And every story deserves to be told in the light. Not every secret protects, not every silence preserves. Some destroy quietly from the inside out. So, speak, ask, look, listen, because your truth, no matter how heavy, is still yours. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply open the door. I am Elias. and I am finally free.